Jurgen Klopp is, in many people's eyes, the best manager in world football. Over the course of a 19-year managerial career, the former second Bundesliga slogger has guided Mainz from a second-tier relegation battle to European football, Borussia Dortmund, from the bottom half of the Bundesliga table to consecutive title wins and a Champions League final, and he's now taken Liverpool from 8th place in his debut campaign to both Champions League and Premier League titles. It's a pretty extraordinary tale, and Klopp has done much of his best work under tighter financial restraints than many of his competitors, and all whilst playing an energetic and entertaining brand of football. Klopp's ascent to being considered among world football's elite occurred at Borussia Dortmund, where he was handed the top job in May 2008. And if that month rings a bell, it's probably because that month is more fondly remembered as the month in which a Dean Windass volley sent Hull City into the Premier League for the first time in their 104-year history. Anyhow, in today's video, I thought I'd take a quick look back at Klopp's first summer in charge at the Westfalenstadion, the transfer business that he did, and where those players are now. Stay tuned, there are some strange tales ahead, and I should add that the 7 only includes players signed for Dortmund's first team, not Borussia Dortmund 2. Here are young Klopp's first 7 Borussia Dortmund signings. Where are they now? Mohamed Zidan, retired. Before I begin, I should point out that none of these 7 players were actually Borussia Dortmund's first signing during the summer of 2008. That title goes to Felipe Santana, signed on May 16th, but since that was 3 days before Jurgen Klopp was officially appointed by the Bundesliga giants, Santana doesn't make this 7. In the interest of full disclosure though, Santana went on to play more than 100 games for Dortmund, and he recently signed for Brazilian outfit Chapecoense. Back to Mohamed Zidan, who was signed by Jurgen Klopp, Zidan arrived on August 17th in a player exchange deal which saw Mladen Petric head in the opposite direction. In addition to signing Zidan and selling Petric, Dortmund also received a €5 million fee from Hamburg, so the transfer wasn't a straight-up swap deal. Zidan was reunited with Klopp, who he had starred under at Mainz, scoring 13 goals in 15 league games whilst permanently contracted to the club. He couldn't maintain that level of scoring under Klopp in Dortmund, scoring 13 goals in 4 years with the club before returning to Mainz. Now aged 38, Zidan retired in 2015, following a brief stint back in Egypt, and he has since done sporadic work as a pundit for beIN Sports, as well as having his 3rd child, who is named Zidan. That's right, his name is Zidan Zidan, so there's no pressure on him to end up being any good at football. YongPyo, retired. Among the finest Asian fullbacks of all time, YongPyo was a right-footed left-back who starred in Europe for PSV Eindhoven, Tottenham Hotspur and Borussia Dortmund. He also won a whopping 127 caps for South Korea as one of the nation's key men in their famous run on home soil at the 2002 World Cup. YongPyo was signed by Klopp from Tottenham in 2008 for just €500,000, but following a bright start, he lost his place in Jurgen Klopp's starting 11 to Brazilian wingback and Dortmund legend Dede. Lee left Europe having been frozen out at Dortmund, spending 2 years in Saudi Arabia with Al Hilal, followed by 2 years in Canada with the Vancouver Whitecaps. He subsequently hung up his boots, aged 36, and 7 years on, the 43-year-old can now often be found sharing his views on his former clubs, along with his love of Christ. YongPyo became a pretty enthusiastic Christian during his playing days, having been introduced to faith by his teammates, and that belief only appears to have grown stronger since his retirement. YongPyo takes a rather literal interpretation of the Bible, stating in his autobiography that, quote, "The people who say homosexuals are just different instead of wrong are the truly dangerous ones," end quote, whilst also having encouraged his wife not to take painkillers when giving birth, according to some reports, because God's punishment to women for eating the forbidden fruit in the Garden of Eden was that they should go through pain during childbirth. So, from a left-back to right-back to the Stone Ages in terms of his views, that is what YongPyo is up to these days. Neven Subotic, free agent. The biggest success story among young Klopp's first 7 signings as manager of Borussia Dortmund, Neven Subotic, was someone who Klopp had signed at Mainz as a 17-year-old. Following 2 successful seasons for Klopp's former club, the German boss took Subotic with him to Borussia Dortmund in his biggest summer signing, as Subotic set the club back €4.5 million. Subotic still proved to be a bargain, spending the next 10 years at the Westfalenstadion, where he played more than 250 games. A key man in both of Dortmund's Bundesliga title successes, Subotic peaked early, mostly due to injuries, and his decline was a rather severe and sudden one. The Serbian Jesus, as he is affectionately known, who spent much of his childhood in the United States, finally left Dortmund in 2018. Following an injury-free season in France with St. Etienne, Subotic returned to Germany last summer in a move to Bundesliga new boys Union Berlin. The 31-year-old signed a 2-year deal with Union, but following 23 appearances and 1 goal, which helped the club to finish in mid-table, he agreed to contract termination at the end of the season. Subotic, who hasn't represented Serbia since 2013, is now being linked with a move to Turkey on a free transfer. Tomáš Heinel, Ferencváros chief scout. Formerly of Schalke and Kaiserslautern, Tomáš Heinel was a diminutive and gifted attacking midfielder who had a fair few injury problems of his own and never really found a club that he could call home for any length of time. Jurgen Klopp brought him to Borussia Dortmund during his first summer in charge off the back of an impressive campaign with Karlsruhe, and he set the club back €1.25 million. For that fee, Dortmund got 2 years of service out of the Hungarian before offloading him to Stuttgart for a minor loss. Always someone who flattered to deceive, showing glimpses of class, but rarely nailing down a starting berth or stringing together consistently good form, Heinel started and ended his career back in Hungary with Ferencváros. He hung up his boots in 2018, aged 37, and 2 years on, he now serves as the club's chief scout. Patrick Uvemoyela, Bundesliga commentator. There was certainly an effort to strengthen the Borussia Dortmund defence during the summer of 2008. And Patrick Uvemoyela was brought in having lost his way a little at Werder Bremen. Following a really bright start with the River Islanders, Uvemoyela had fallen out of favour with Werder and Klopp spotted a chance to strike. Dortmund signed the former German international, who won 11 caps between 2004 and 2006, for a fee of just €2.5 million. It turned out to be a pretty shrewd piece of business. Uvemoyela didn't set the world alight at Dortmund, but he was solid enough for right back, whilst also covering in holding midfield. He made a grand total of 76 Bundesliga appearances during 5 years at the Signal Iduna Park, before ending his career with Hamburg at the age of 34, where he only ever played for the club's reserve team. Since hanging up his boots, the 40-year-old has become a prominent commentator on Bundesliga games and German internationals, landing himself in hot water this time last year when he did an impersonation of Hitler whilst commentating on a pre-season game between Borussia Dortmund and Udinese. I'm not making that up, by the way. Byram Sadriai, free agent. The least well-known name in this 7, I would suggest, Byram Sadriai, was a lower league signing who Jurgen Klopp took a bit of a flyer on back in 2008. Sadriai, who was born in Augsburg but is of Kosovan descent, had been scoring goals for fun for Lolif Danhausen prior to his move to Dortmund. Between 2005 and 2008, Sadriai had bagged 41 goals in 63 league games for the Bavarian outfit, in the 4th and 5th tiers of German football. It's a pretty significant leap from regional Bavarian football to the Bundesliga though, and it proved to be a leap that was beyond Sadriai. He bagged a few goals for Borussia Dortmund too, but he blanked in every one of his 7 league appearances under Jurgen Klopp. Very sadly, at the age of 24 and while still contracted to Dortmund, Sadriai was involved in a car crash which forced him into an early retirement. He returned 3 years later with Danhausen back in the depths of the Bavarian game, but he couldn't rediscover his former glories. He has since had a couple of clubs since then, mostly in the amateur leagues, and is currently out of contract, aged 34. Kevin-Prince Boateng, Fiorentina. The second player Jurgen Klopp signed from Tottenham during his first season in charge at Borussia Dortmund, Kevin-Prince Boateng joined the Germans on loan for half a season, having made 21 appearances for Spurs during the previous campaign. The dynamic German Garnet midfielder arrived in January 2009 and he made 11 appearances as Jurgen Klopp finished 6th in his first season in charge of Dortmund. Klopp was impressed by Boateng, but Dortmund couldn't find the funds to make the deal a permanent one. Portsmouth, meanwhile, who had no hesitations about spending money that they didn't have at that time, were able to find the funds, bringing KPB to Fratton Park in a deal worth £4 million. A bit of a journeyman, Prince Boateng has since played for the likes of AC Milan, Schalke, and most famously, of course, Barcelona. He is currently contracted to Fiorentina, but having spent last season on loan at Besiktas, Fiorentina appear to have no plans for Prince Boateng long term. Interest in the 33-year-old is thought to remain high, with reports of a potential return to Las Palmas in the Canary Islands, or maybe even a move to the MLS. So those were Jurgen Klopp's first 7 first-team signings as Borussia Dortmund boss, of whom you could only really call Neven Subotic a real success. However, the following summer, Klopp snapped up Mats Hummels for €4.2 million, followed by Robert Lewandowski for under €5 million the season after that, and both Ilkay Gundogan and Ivan Perisic for a combined total of just €11 million in 2011. So overall, his transfer dealings were rather impressive. That's it for today's video. I thank you all as ever for tuning in. Absolutely obliterate the like button if you found this video even remotely watchable. Make sure to subscribe to HITC Sevens if you don't already, and you can also follow me on Twitter or Instagram, or both, on the username HITC Sevens on both platforms.